Okay, we're going to pick up with the notes. We're going to start where we left off in class today, Japanese internment, so Japanese Americans and the war. So there were many Japanese immigrants as well as Japanese American citizens living in California at this time, so living along the West Coast. And after Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of hatred toward the Japanese citizens living here, living in America. Now, they were more easily targeted in the United States compared to the other Axis powers, Italy and Germany, because they were easier to identify. So, the Japanese were rounded up from the West Coast, according to Executive Order 9066. So this was a direct order from the president, who is still at this time FDR. This order called for the evacuation of Japanese Americans from the West Coast and that they should be detained in camps for the rest of the war. Many who were detained were American-born citizens and had absolutely no connection to Japan at all. So this is a direct violation of civil liberties. It was later in the 1980s that President Ronald Reagan, would formally apologize. He also paid reparations to each living survivor of $20,000. Okay, Native Americans and the war. Oh, here's some pictures first, sorry. I know that it's probably going to cut off your screen, but these are some pictures of Japanese internment camps. Okay, Native Americans and the war. The Navajo language would be used for military code during World War II. It was Choctaw that was used during World War I, but it's going to be the Navajo language that's used in World War II. We called a group of these Native Americans that were of Navajo descent, we called them the Code Talkers, because they specifically taught at boot camp how to learn some of the words that would be used for the military code. So the Code Talkers refers to roughly 200 Navajo Indians that were sent to boot camps and worked on creating a series of codes to be used for World War II.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm alright.
And here's an example of the pictures used during camp with the Code Talkers. Okay, we're now going to transition to war in Europe and North Africa, and that's what I kind of want to get through today. Right here. So, making Germany a priority. FDR and Churchill both agreed that they should focus on fighting in Europe, specifically Germany, first, because it was Germany that posed a bigger threat than Japan. So, the majority of America's resources would be employed in the fight against Germany, and they would later be used to fight against Japan. It's not that we weren't at all fighting at Japan at this time, but we're mostly fighting Germany. Okay. And we're going to start talking about the war in North Africa. Okay? And this front was known as Operation Torch. So, Operation Torch was led by American General Dwight Eisenhower. And it was a campaign to invade the Axis-controlled countries of North Africa. So, Dwight Eisenhower and just over 100,000 Allied troops landed in several cities in northern Africa. You don't have to know the name of the cities. And they started to spread east, chasing after a certain German general, Erwin Rommel. And he was kind of leading a group of German soldiers fighting in Africa known as the Afrika Korps. I have that spelled on the screen, A-F-R-I-K-A, then K-O-R-P-S. In May of 1943, so just 6 months after they had started, the last of the Afrika Korps surrendered to the Allies. So now that the Allied powers had a strong control over northern Africa, they're going to be able to launch a campaign from the south to come up through Europe, and they'll start with Italy. So, the Italian campaign. Before victory in North Africa, FDR, Churchill, and their commanders met in Northern Africa and had agreed to accept only the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers. They agreed to accept only the unconditional surrender. And unconditional surrender meant that the enemy nations would have to accept whatever terms of peace the Allies dictated. They also discussed where they would strike next, and they decided on Italy. Now, the Italian campaign started off strong with a quick win over the Italian island of Sicily. The Italian government was so stunned by this quick defeat that they actually forced the dictator Benito Mussolini to step down and formally resign. And he will actually be executed by the Italian government. The Italians thought that the war was over in their country. However, Hitler immediately began sending troops to Italy, rather than have to fight on German soil. So they're using Italy as kind of a holding ground to prevent the Allied troops from being able to come even further north into Germany. Ultimately, however, that too ended bad for the Axis, as the Allies were able to defeat the Germans. Oops, sorry. So Italy was finally free from the Axis powers. And Germany is losing its stronghold of Europe. Now I want to quickly talk about some heroes of the Italian campaign, and we'll talk about D-Day together tomorrow to talk about furthermore the European campaign with Operation Overlord. But we'll pick up today just really quickly. Two groups that were considered heroes during the Italian campaign were actually African American units. And so we first have the Tuskegee Airmen. Tuskegee, not Tuskegee. And they were members of the all-black 99th Pursuit Squadron. And they fought for the Allies in Italy. They successfully fought against the German Luftwaffe. And on a side note, they're eventually awarded very high distinctions. I think the highest in the military, actually, because of their success. Another African American unit became distinguished, and this was the 92nd Infantry Division, and they were nicknamed the Buffaloes. In just 6 months of fighting in Europe, they had earned 7 Legion of Merit awards, 65 Silver Stars, and 162 Bronze Stars for courage under fire. I don't really care that you know the exact number here. I just want you to know they were the recipients of Merit Awards, Silver Stars, and Bronze Stars for their courage in those 6 months of fighting. And it's just important to know that they would also have other segregated units in the military, such as Mexican American units, Japanese American units, believe it or not, okay? And they were also awarded different honors and acknowledgments because they were all successful. And so, even though we had that injustice and inequality at home, these men did not let that hold them back for giving war and giving it their all in their fight for America abroad. Okay, so we'll pick up with the notes tomorrow with D-Day. So come prepared for that. Y'all have a great night. Write down questions and be prepared with this material tomorrow.